Welcome to Shahnameh, Book of Kings. Today we continue with the reign of Hormozd. When Parmoudeh learned that Bahram was ambitious for the imperial throne, he deposited all his gold and silver coins and his jewels in a castle that he felt was safe and secure. Then he crossed the Oxus with his army and went forward confidently to battle. The two armies were soon face to face, and each of them pitched camp in the environs of Balkh. There were 2 parsangs distance between the two, a space appropriate for a battlefield. The next day, Bahram, who was eager for battle, hurried out to observe Parmoudeh's forces. Parmoudeh was also watching and saw him as Bahram chose a high hill and ranged his army in front of it, covering the plain. Parmoudeh was taken aback at this show of force and the sight of Bahram before his troops, his warlike head lifted up to the sky. Filled with anxiety, he said to his men, "This leader is like a lion in his pride and ferocity, and the black earth where he stands will run with blood. His troops can't be numbered, and anyone who would be reluctant to confront them. When night falls, we'll attack, and thereby drive fear and anxiety from our hearts." When Bahram marched with Persia against the Turks, an astrologer had said to him, "Start no enterprise on a Wednesday. If you ignore this advice, you will be harmed, and nothing you do will bring any profit to you." Between the two armies, to one side of the battlefield, there was a garden. On Wednesday, Bahram went there, saying, "Today will be a day of pleasure." His men brought fine carpets, wine, musicians, and food. Bahram sat there drinking until 1 watch of the night had passed. A scout went to Parmoudeh and said, "Bahram is in that garden drinking." Parmoudeh chose 6,000 of his horsemen and sent them to encircle the garden without showing any light. But Bahram realized what was being planned and said to Yalan Sinna, "Make an opening in the garden wall." Then he and Izad Goshap and the other warriors who were with him mounted their horses and rode through the breach in the wall. Who knows how they managed it? Trumpets sounded at the garden door. The commander urged his horse forward as a second breach was quickly made in the wall, and the enemy forces were thrown into a turmoil. Bahram fought with a javelin in his hand, like a man who was half drunk. He was so eager for blood that no one he encountered escaped him. The commander's cries and the sounds of iron against steel rang out, and from the garden to Parmoudeh's camp the way was littered with headless corpses. When Bahram reached his encampment again, he too decided on a night attack, and with half the night gone, he led his men out into the plain. They reached the Turkish lines without being seen by the sentries, and announced their approach with the squeal of trumpets and the din of drums. The Turkish warriors leapt up, and the tumultuous noise would have deafened a savage lion. Right and left in the darkness, close combats began in the night, and with long lances everywhere, men did not know friend from foe. Sparks glittered from swords and seemed to burn the earth and air. Few Turks remained alive, and their blood made the stones there resemble nothing so much as coral. Their leader fled like wind-blown dust, his mouth dry and his lips turned blue, and kept going until dawn broke and night drew back her skirts. But Bahram pursued him, and when he reached him, he roared like a lion. "Don't mix with warriors. If all you can do is run away, then danger threatens you. You're just a little boy. You should have stayed sucking your mother's milk if you were afraid." And Parmoudeh replied, "How much blood must you shed before you'll be satisfied? When they fight, leopards on land and crocodiles in the rivers eventually become sated with blood. But you've never had enough. You're like an insatiable lion. You cut off the head of Seva Shah, whom the turning heavens loved while he lived, and you destroyed his army in such a way that the sun and moon felt pity for them. I am that warrior king's son, and you should know that you killed me too when you killed him. But we are all born from our mothers for death, whether we are Turks or Persians. You can pursue me as I flee, but you won't catch me until the end of time. If I return armed, either of us might be killed in combat. Don't be so headstrong and fiery. This is not how an army commander should act. I shall return to my castle and try a new tack. I'll write to your king in the hopes that he will grant me his protection. If he accepts my petition and helps me, I shall be the slave of his court and give up all hopes of sovereignty. I'll rid my mind of all thoughts of war and vengeance and make a pact of peace with him." When Bahram heard him speak in this way, he turned back. After his army had rested from battle for a while, he went to King Parmoudeh's abandoned camp and toured the area, cutting the heads from the bodies of the dead Turkish noblemen. These he heaped up together, and the pile was like a mountain in a height and breadth. Everyone still calls this place Bahram's Hill. Then he dragged all the Turks' armor and equipment to this hill, and finally wrote a letter to Hormozd concerning Parmoudeh and his enormous army. He wrote about the Turks and their warlike king, who, out of fear of Bahram's sword, had resorted to a trick. Now the king had had to flee ignominiously from the battle. For his part, Parmoudeh closed the doors to his castle and sat conferring anxiously with a crowd of advisers. Many men gathered outside the castle gates, but no one knew what the plans of war were. Bahram said, "We should press ahead with this war." He told Yalan Sena to select 3,000 horsemen and directed Arzap-Goshap to take 4,000. The two of them were to attack whomever they could find, in the hope that when he saw the plains flowing with blood, Parmoudeh would be lured out of his castle. For 3 days they scoured the land in front of his castle in this way, and on the 4th, as the sun rose, Bahram sent a message to Parmoudeh saying, "Lord and King of the Chinese Turks, why have you chosen this castle of all places in the world? Where now is Seva Shah's ambition to rule the earth? Where are his treasures and power, his elephants and their barding, his clear-minded nobles? Where are his sorcerer's tricks and stratagems, that you've now hidden yourself away like this? The land of the Turks wasn't enough for you? The world had never seen anyone as fine as your father, but now you're holed up in his castle like a woman, beating your hands against your head in desperation and with bitterness in your heart? Open your castle gates and ask for mercy. Ask to be allied with my country's king and send out whatever wealth you have. I will speak for you at the king's court, and if you have some secret that's lighting up your dark soul, reveal it to me. Don't hold yourself aloof now that your situation's so desperate. If you want war, no army's going to help you when you've no money. But if you've allies enough and treasure and cash enough, then beat your war drums and come out and fight." When the envoy had delivered the message, Parmoudeh replied, "Say to him, don't struggle to know the world's secrets. Because your first trial turned out well, you have become overconfident of the world's ways. Don't be so vain of victory. You may be young, but the world is old. No one knows the secrets of the turning heavens because they never show us their true face. Ridicule does not become a nobleman, and remember that I too once possessed an army, elephants, and war drums. The high heavens weave lies, and you should not give your heart over to presumptuous pride. My father was a brave, experienced warrior, and you saw him on the day of battle. The earth was the slave of his horse's hooves, and the heavens turned as he willed. But he sought what he should not have sought, and his evil designs brought him torment. Merit is obscured by ridicule, and our enemies laugh at us. You say that you have more cavalry and elephants than grain in the hopper of a mill, but this was true of him too. His good luck deserted him, and you will not always be prosperous and hailed as the light of the world. You should fear your fate, for it can turn an antidote into poison. Any man who makes bloodshed his profession will have enemies plot against him, and they will spill his blood as he has spilled the blood of other warriors. If you raise destruction smoke over the land of the Turks, they will want vengeance sooner or later. I shall not present myself before you because I fear for my life. You are a slave, and I am a king. How can I grovel before a slave? And I shall not fight you without an army because my friends would say I was crazy to do so. If the straits I'm in force me to ask for quarter from your king, there is no shame in that. and then the doors to my treasury and my castle will be yours, and you can do as you wish with this noble land." The envoy delivered his message, and Bahram was satisfied with what he heard. Bahram wrote a favorable letter to his victorious king, saying, "The Chinese emperor is besieged and asks for your favor. He requires a sealed letter of safe conduct, and when he receives it, he will come to establish peace between you. He has fallen from greatness into misery and desires your protection." When this letter arrived, the king's joy seemed limitless. He summoned his courtiers and sat the envoy on a royal throne. As the man read the letter, jewels were poured over him. Hormozd said to his courtiers, "Thanks be to God. I shall pray for 3 watches of the night, because the Emperor of China will be my subject, and the high heavens will be my crown." The leader of the Chinese Turks lifted his head up to the heavens and thought of himself as a king of the world. But now he pays homage to me. I give thanks to the Lord of the sun and the moon, who has granted me the authority. I shall bestow hoarded wealth on the poor, so that the goodness will come of this, and you too will praise God and act with righteousness. He called over Bahram's envoy and spoke to him kindly and at length. He asked for a jewel-studded belt, clothes made of gold cloth, a horse with a bridle worked with gold and jewels. These he handed to the envoy, and added a purse of gold coins and many other presents. Then he declared that Bahram was the chief of all champions, and had a scribe write a proclamation on silk. "Parmoudeh, the emperor, is my ally. He is under the protection of Hormozd. May God, whose slaves we are, witness this seal and proclamation." Then he wrote a letter as affectionate as heaven's grace to his ambitious commander. "Allow Parmoudeh and his army to come to my court, and send here whatever is valuable among the spoils you have taken from his army. May God be your guide in this matter. Search out where the enemy might still be hiding, and may your good fortune enable you to capture them and burn their houses. If you think more efforts are required and you need more troops, ask for them, and I shall send you as many as necessary. Give me the name of those Persians who have acted well and valiantly in this war, and so that they may be rewarded. I shall give your men the border areas, and you will receive a crown of authority over them." When this letter reached Bahman, his heart was rejuvenated. He was astonished, and summoned the Persian troops to see the gifts he had been sent. Everyone who saw them congratulated him. Then he read the letter, and such a cry of congratulations went up that the ground seemed to shake. He sent the warrant of safe conduct to Parmoudeh in his castle and brightened the darkness of his soul. That nobleman descended from his castle, blessed Hormozd's name as he did so. Everything of value in the castle was recorded. The proud commander of the castle immediately mounted his war horse and marched with his men out of the castle, ignoring Bahram. When Bahram saw that, despite having captured this king, he was being treated with contempt, he sent men to bring Parmoudeh before the army on foot. Parmoudeh said to him, "I was the lord of any assembly, and now I am suppliant with no power. I have descended from my ivory throne to a wretched state. You are a malevolent man, and today you have not acted well towards me in having me brought before your troops like this. I have a warrant of safe conduct, and I intend to travel to the king. He hopes that he will treat me as a brother and lighten the burden of my sorrows. What business have you with me now that I have handed over to you my royal throne and wealth?" Parmoudeh's words enraged Bahram, and he lost all sense of proportion. He struck at Parmoudeh violently with his whip, as a man might strike an inferior. He had his legs bound in iron fetters and confined him in a tent. When Khord Borzan saw this, he said to himself, "Good sense is no friend to this commander." He went to the chief scribe and said, "This terrifying champion has less sense than the wing of a mosquito, and that's why he has no respect for anyone else. Someone should tell him that this is not the way to act, and that there's no greater danger to a man than his anger." The two of them went to Bahram, their faces dark with foreboding, their lips filled with device. They said, "You have thrown away the fruits of your labors. God forbid that a nobleman's head be filled with fire like this." Bahram knew that he had acted in an ugly fashion, that he had done something as foolish as throwing sun-baked bricks into water. He regretted his actions, held his head in his hands in shame, and had Parmoudeh released from his fetters. He sent Parmoudeh a horse with gold-work bridle and an Indian sword in a golden scabbard. He went to him to alleviate his stress. He stayed with him a while. He prepared to leave, watched him mount his swift horse, and accompanied him along part of his route. But he saw that the king's face did not relax or grow cheerful. When the time came for them to separate, he said, "I think you're angry with me in your heart. If this is so, say nothing about it to Persia's king. It will do your reputation with him any good." The emperor replied, "My complaints are against fortune, and I have addressed them to God. Don't think of me as someone who will gossip about everyone. But if your king learns nothing of this, he does not deserve to be king. The turning heavens put me in fetters. I shall not say that some slave injured me." Bahram turned pale at these words. He writhed inwardly, but managed to swallow his anger. He said, "As far as you are able to, don't sow destruction seeds. You'll reap them when they grow. I tried to make your situation better. I wrote on your behalf, and in my letter I did not tell the king of all you'd done in trying to renew the war he'd won." The emperor replied, "That evil has gone by, and the past is a wind. When a man is defeated in war, he has to be patient and make peace. But peace and anger seem to be the same to you, and it's clear you have little enough good sense. If a man follows his Lord, he doesn't stumble at every turning. It's God's way we should follow and cleanse our hearts of darkness. The evil you've done has gone like the wind. It would be better if you said no more about it." Bahram said, "I hoped this matter would remain secret, but if the sin I've committed is going to produce trouble, I won't try to hide it under a silk veil. When you get there, say whatever you want to. My reputation won't be harmed by it." The emperor replied, "I consider any king's fool who takes no account of good and evil, and who is silent when his subjects act in ways that are wrong. Seeing such things from a distance, anyone, enemy, well-wisher, or ally would say that you are an impulsive and contemptible lot, and that the Persian king is feeble-minded." Bahram was enraged, and his face turned pale. Borzan saw this, and was afraid that his bloodthirsty master would kill Parmoudeh in his fury. He said to Bahram, "My lord, swallow your anger and turn back. When the emperor has said is true, you should listen to him and drive evil thoughts from your mind. If you had not spoken so coldly toward him, your heart would not now be so troubled." Bahram replied, "This vicious, talentless son can wait to rejoin his father." The emperor spoke again. "Don't do this evil to yourself. Greatness grows old with anger. People like you, with heads full of dust and hearts full of smoke, think ill of everyone and get on with no one, and their pride is perversity and foolishness. You try to frighten me with talk of King of Kings, but it is right that my pain and peace should come from him. He is my equal, a nobleman as I am, and he's not some malevolent slave. He's a wise, dignified, of good lineage, and he remembers those who are well born. I command you, by the head and the army of the Persian king, to turn back now and to say nothing further to worsen your situation." When he heard this, Bahram turned back to his army's encampment. Borzan, the chief scribe, and other learned men wrote a letter to the king recounting everything that had happened, publicly and privately. In the anger of the moment, Bahram said to the chief priest, "Go immediately into the castle. Hurry like the wind, and see what kind of treasure is there." The scribes went with trepidation in their hearts, and worked from sunrise until 3 watches of the night had passed away. Pages were blackened with ink, but still the work was not finished. There was hardly room to move in the castle, so many undisturbed ancient treasures were there. From the times of Afrazab and Ashas, There were gold coins, pearls from the sea, and gems from mine, whose excavation was heaven's work. Famous treasures were there, like the belt of Siavash, which had 3 bands of jewels on each boss, and also his earrings, the like of which no commoner or nobleman in all the world had ever owned. King Khosrow had given them to Lorasp, who in turn had given them to Goshtasp, and Arjasp had placed them in the castle at a time that no one remembers. No astrologer or learned man could compute the wealth gathered there. One by one, each item was recorded, and Bahram sent in an eloquent, honest, and alert scribes to gather everything of value that was in the castle and bring it to one place on the plain. Among the valuable objects were a pair of earrings and a pair of boots with gold thread braids on them, and jewels at the end of each braid. There were also 2 bolts of Yemeni cloth, of gold weighing 7 man each. In his perversity and arrogance, Bahram ignored his duty and set these things aside. Then he ordered Pedagashap to take the treasures to the king with an escort of 1,000 troops. He demanded 10 caravans of camels from the emperor and counted off the goods as they were loaded. When the emperor at the head and baggage train, following on behind, the caravans made their way to court. While the king of the world sat in state with a crown on his head and a mace in his fist, news came that the emperor and his train of ancient treasures were approaching. The king went on horseback to the courtyard of his palace to see the emperor's face, and also to see whether, when the emperor caught sight of him, he and his escort would dismount. He waited anxiously for the outcome, and the emperor and Pedagashap came into view. The emperor dismounted and ran toward the king. There was a pause, and then Parmoudeh remounted his black Arab horse. The king of kings urged his own horse forward, and the 2 conferred together for a moment in the courtyard. But as Parmoudeh tried to follow the king into the palace, and the chamberlain caught at his horse's bridle, Parmoudeh quickly dismounted and showed his duplicity by this act of homage. The king too dismounted, taking him by the hand, and led him forward to the throne. He showed him great kindness and questioned him. The 2 talked for a long time together. Apartments worthy of his rank were set aside for him and decorated, and Parmoudeh was provided with everything that he could need. His men were given quarters near him, and a scribe was placed at his disposal. The king sent servants to take care of the treasures that had accompanied Parmoudeh. A mounted messenger arrived with a letter from the chief scribes, which read, "May the king reign in prosperity forever, and all his actions be generous and just. Know then that the army's champion has taken 2 bolts of Yemeni cloth, a pair of boots encrusted with uncut jewels, and the earrings of the noble Siavash that have come down to us as a reminder of his greatness. Since the champion underwent great hardships, this should not be any cause for surprise." The king turned to Parmoudeh and asked him to recount what he had seen, and Parmoudeh confirmed what the scribes had written. Hormozd burst out in fury. "This overbearing man has lost his way. Forgetting it's his business to obey, he dares to strike the Chinese emperor as though he were some base inferior, and then he takes these earrings as if he were heir to some imperial family. His good deeds have dispersed like wind-blown dust. His justice is now shown to be unjust." He summoned Parmoudeh to the place of honor at his side, and the 2 feasting until night came and spread its dusky curls over the assembly. Hormozd turned to Parmoudeh and said, "You have suffered a great deal from my country." Taking Parmoudeh's hand in his, he said to the emperor, astonishment, "Renew our treaty, and let us set out our agreement on a new basis." Then they swore a solemn oath by God and their souls that Hormozd would not turn his heart aside from the emperor, and that he would not change his mind in this for anything that Parmoudeh did. They swore by the throne and crown, by the sun and the moon, by the sacred fires of Arza-Gashap and Arza-Panai, by God, who is above all, and who maintains Venus and Jupiter in their courses, that when Parmoudeh returned to his people, he would not turn aside from Hormozd or from his courtiers. When they had sworn this oath, they rose and retired to their sleeping quarters. As the yellow sun rose above the mountains, the two kings awoke. Hormozd had prepared a robe of honor, woven from gold and silver, together with a horse and crown. He sent these to the emperor and then accompanied him for 2 stages of his return journey. At the end of the 3rd long stage, he said his farewells to Parmoudeh and turned back. When Bahram learned of the gifts Parmoudeh had received from the king and that he was returning in triumph, he went out to meet him, accompanied by his Persian noblemen. He had a stock of fodder made ready for Parmoudeh at every stage of the route. He would take in the towns and villages as well as the plains and mountains. Bahram came before him prepared to apologize humbly for his former behavior. He greeted him respectfully, but the Emperor of China turned his head away and refused to accept any of Bahram's gifts, including the fodder he had provided for him, and the slaves and purses of gold he had brought. Bahram rode with him, but the emperor would not cast a glance at him, and so they went forward for 3 days, during which Parmoudeh did not address a word to him. On the 4th day, the emperor sent Bahram a message: "Go back. You have tired yourself out enough." Bahram angrily turned back toward Balkh, and there he stayed for a while, regretting his former actions, his heart filled with sorrow. And here's where we end our tales for today, but I'll be back tomorrow with more tales, many more tales. Until then, my friends,